Thank you, madam. Can you clap for her? Quite intuitive, informative with regard to their role as non-state actors and how best they would shape the destiny of governance in not just in Vihiga and Kisumu, but the entire of the Republic, even going beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, again with humility, uh, allow me to welcome the representative for WHH, Christian Schneiper. Makofi, karibu.
Okay, thank you very much. That was already a great setting of the scene. Thanks, Diana. Dear ladies and gentlemen, our guest of honor, His Excellency, Governor of Vihiga County, Dr. Otichilo, and the representative today, Mr. Onyango. You're most welcome to the event. Thanks so much for taking your time and coming to this regional dialogue. Good morning, everyone, and karibu also from my side. The regional dialogue on the right to food, taking progressive steps towards zero hunger by 2030. It is my pleasure and a true honor to stand here in front of you to convene and this gathering here. And since we're talking about one of the most important and pressing issues of our time, hunger and poverty. My name is Christian Schnieper. I'm the country director of the Welthungerhilfe program here in Kenya. We are fighting globally hunger and poverty since about 60 years. And here in Kenya, we have about 170 staff that is working every day on this cause. As Welthungerhilfe, we also published a global hunger index. You find it quoted in the documents that you have found on the table. It is that statistic that shows the 28% of the Kenyan population being malnourished or undernourished. And those devastating statistics are also published every year in the Global Hunger Index report. This year we had an event in Nairobi, at the University of Nairobi. And this year's statistics are also not very promising. Out of 125 countries that have been analyzed, Kenya is only positioned at position 91, which is an indicator of alarming levels of hunger in the country. Of course, you know it also from the everyday reality that Diana already described, but also in other parts of the country, that these statistics are turning into suffering in households and communities out there. And it shows again how important the discussion is today. And the right to food is not only a fundamental human right, it is also a moral imperative for all of us to find ways to come together and to find the necessary action that improves the situation of the communities that we are serving all together. In today's dialogue, we would like to improve the understanding on the right to food. So especially on the first panel, we will have discussions around the legal frameworks, the policies, the national and international commitments that have been made, so that we are better equipped to participate in the discussions and advocate for future policies and to implement and enforce the right to food on all levels. We will also have a session on case studies where we will benefit from the panelists' rich experience and the sharing of the knowledge that is inspiring us for future action. We will also find inspiration in innovations that will be presented, and we collect lessons learned that can guide our future action in this context. We will also talk very much about accountability, which is so much needed to achieve our ambition on zero hunger. We must hold ourselves accountable, our partners, our stakeholders, the duty bearers, and also the right holders, to really work together and have a monitoring and evaluation mechanisms in place that measure our progress and also the effective use of our resources that we allocate for this course. At the end, we would like to turn this dialogue into a joint action, and we would like to agree on the joint action and the direction to take. So that's a very important point that I would like to make here, that this dialogue must lead to action and a joint commitment to follow up in future for the betterment of the livelihoods and the hunger situation in all our communities. So before we embark on this journey, I would like to thank all our project partners. You see them listed here. First and foremost, Rural Outreach Africa and TISA that have already spoken, but also the Zero Hunger Initiative, which is basically an initiative from the Lake Region Food System Network, and the Right to Food Coalition. All of them are present today, and I'm very grateful to have them. They are a wonderful network and a coalition. They bring in their expertise, and you will find them on the panels today. So thanks so much for being also committed to our cause and the passion and the motivation that you show every day in your work. Thanks to the support of ROA and TISA, we have also, I was witnessing the last couple of days, the excellent work that they have done in the communities. Thanks to their support, we have about 60 Right to Food ambassadors that have been equipped and empowered to work with the communities on the right to food, raise the awareness on the legal framework and the rights, and they play a very important role in facilitating the dialogue between the communities and the duty bearers on the county level. I've also been in a very inspiring meeting on county level. We were talking about the grievance redress mechanism, and I found very committed directors, the director for public participation, the director for Today Tourism, in those days also public participation, director for ICT. It was a great discussion and very inspiring for me, who was previously working in a different country, where it was a bit difficult to have such great conversations between NGOs and CSOs and counties. So thanks so much for this remarkable achievement already, and also for committing to come today and having this dialogue together. Very much appreciated, and maybe you deserve a clap. Thank you very much. I also would like to thank all the panelists that are here and for their expertise and their willingness to share their knowledge. Feel encouraged, be open in all the discussions. And this is also what I would like to extend to all the participants that are sitting here in the room. Let us take this advantage and this opportunity that we have here to sit together. Let us have a good conversation, bring in all the knowledge and the insights that you have. Let us harness the power of collaboration and sharing and the solidarity that we need to win the fight against hunger, so that at the end of the day, no child is malnourished or going to bed hungry, and we can really win the fight against hunger and poverty in our communities. Asante sana.
Thank you so much, Christian Schnapper, for your remarks. I'm very sure the keynote speaker would love to hear the comments you've made with regard to a number of interventions that have been undertaken by the non-state actors in Vihiga County. And so I think when he comes back, ladies and gentlemen, he would really want to hear that. He wants to hear it from the horse's mouth, not from John Ongonda, but from the real horse. Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, those who are very intuitive remarks that will go ahead in improving the governance system, not just on right to food, but in enhancing best practices for Kenya and even beyond. And I think on that note, he needs a better clap. Thank you, and thank you so much. I know a number of us are wondering why I did not do the introduction. It was very deliberate, so that we don't duplicate it. Immediately the keynote speaker comes in, we shall do a round of introduction to know who is among us, so that we pick it up from there, moving forward. And therefore, allow me to invite the first panel to step forward. The first panel is themed Understanding Right to Food in Kenya. And this panel will be moderated by, just a minute. I want to say more than just Florence. Florence, where are you? Thank you. Florence is a policy and communications consultant. She has over a decade's experience in the field of agriculture and health research and development. She is also made to understand a storyteller. We are yet to get that now here. And a science communications trainer. Florence Spala, get to your feet kindly. A round of clap for her. So kindly, Florence, step forward. We have Njeri Karanu representing the Rural Outreach Africa. Step forward. We have Eunice Owino, Jupicha and Son, Kisumu chapter. And finally, we have Kariuki Kiriba, a law and an advocate with KK Law and Associates, who will also be shedding light on types and forms of violations. Karibu. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, you will allow me to invite the moderator for this session, Madam Sipala, to pick it up from there and lead us through the session. Karibu, Madam.
Thank you very much. You can see. Let me move closer. Yes. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here today. And I will start by introducing our panel so that when we have the conversation, you know who you're talking to. The person right next to me is Njeri Karanu. She is a rural development practitioner who specializes in food systems and the right to food. She coordinates the Right to Food Coalition. She is the one who ensures the wheels keep running well in the national coalition. And she's also a program officer with the Rural Outreach Africa, and she loves grassroots mobilization to ensure that we have inclusive food systems. Karibu Njeri. Next, we have Eunice Owino. She's from Jiupachi, which she tells me is Luo for Style Up, which is an organization that works with people who are infected and affected by HIV, TB, and also works on the whole spectrum from adults to children, looking at also addressing malnutrition. She's also the chair of the Kisumu chapter of Scaling Up Nutrition, which is a CBU, a national, SUN is a national movement that addresses nutrition. Then finally, we are constitutionally constituted. One third, when you're talking about ensuring that things are constitutionally done, we are doing that. We have Kariuki Kiriba. He's a partner at KK Law Advocates. He's also a policy and governance specialist. Yeah, a policy and governance specialist. Karibu KK. So we will start off with Njeri, who will tell us, who will give us a bit of a brief about what is the right to food, and as we start talking about the right to food, how do we look at understanding the rights-based approach on the rights to food? Because we are saying we really have to look at it from a rights-based approach, as Diana had mentioned.
Thank you, Florence, and good morning to everybody. I'm happy to be here with you, and thank you for joining us today. The right to food, in simple terms, it is the right to feed oneself in dignity. The right to feed oneself in dignity. The right to food is a human right. It is not about charity, and it is not the right to be fed. The right to food, again, is a legal guarantee that is protected under international and national laws. So governments are obligated to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights, including the right to food. And citizens, in the right to food or in a human rights approach, they are claimants of rights. Yeah, so their job, their relationship there is to claim rights, services from the duty bearers. And for the duty bearers, that's government and those who are tasked with these duties, to provide or supply services and also to ensure that human rights are protected. Under the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the right to food is defined, they say that the right to food is realized when every man, woman and child, alone or in community with others, has access to adequate food or the means for its procurement. That's very important when we say access, because access to food comes in two folds: economic access and physical access. So when we say you have a right to food, you need to have economic access, that is money, to be able to buy food. And also it means that the cost of food should not interfere with your enjoyment of other rights. So that's why, as a Right to Food Coalition, as a Right to Food advocates, we raise our voice about the cost of living, about the cost of food, because a family should not be making these hard decisions. You know, should we eat? How often should we eat? Should we, this money, how do we divide up, our meager incomes, on education, health, and food? Yeah, so economic access is central to realizing the right to food. And physical access means that food should be provided to vulnerable groups, for example, children, and we see this through school feeding programs. Also, physical access means having infrastructure that enables people to move to get their food, either through roads or bridges across rivers, etc. So that infrastructure needs to be there. Another dimension of right to food is that food should be available either through natural productive resources, that is land, water, forests, and also through market, processing, and distribution systems. The other component of right to food that is very important is that food should be adequate, and this comes in threefold. One, that is actually four, sufficient amounts of food, to meet your caloric needs. But also food should be nutritious, kuwe na lishe bora. Then food should be safe, free from adverse substances. The food we eat should not affect us negatively. It should be safe food. And fourth is food should be culturally acceptable to the community that it is provided. So these are the three most important components about right to food. Others include sustainable, so that as farmers, as citizens, and even governments, we employ sustainable food and farming systems. For example, agroecology. So food that is produced in a sustainable way that ensures equity, and also that natural resources are conserved, that we have food presently and also in the future. Thank you.
Asante sana Njeri. You have heard it's not about having food, but adequate food, nutritious food. So it's not, kwa Kiswahili vile tungesema, sio bora lishe, ni lishe bora. So that then we ensure that it is a wholesome meal, and also that people are able to, the right to food is the right to feed yourself in dignity, not to be fed. This takes us to, the Kenyan Constitution 2010 got us to a point where we agreed to adopt international conventions that we ratify as part of our own legal framework. And so I'd like to go to Eunice and ask her to walk us through what are these international frameworks, the guidelines, and how have they been applied in our national right to food conversation.
Thank you very much. I want to go straight to the roads to sustainable food systems as we talk about my presentation on what are the available instruments for or frameworks included in the voluntary guidelines and policies and manifestos. As she's well rightly said, the Constitution of Kenya 2010 devolved public governance to bring services decision closer to the people. Article 43(1)(c) of the Constitution also obligates government to ensure availability, accessibility, and also affordability of foods to all citizens. A national and regional dialogue national and regional dialogues on food systems were convened to provide opportunities to understand Kenyan food system challenges, solutions, and deliver sustainable development. In September 2021, Kenya made 8 commitments to the United Nations Forum, in the United Nations Forum on Sustainable Standards towards transforming food system. Similarly, in the Nutrition for Growth Summit held in December 2021, Kenya made 9 commitments. Kenya made 9 commitments on tackling malnutrition. And they were as such: adaptation of climate-smart agriculture practices, value addition, biofortification and flour blending, dietary behavior and change, strengthening extension services research and innovation, strengthening of food nutrition and safety policies and regulation frameworks, strengthening of food nutrition and safety policy regulatory frameworks, and strengthening food and nutrition governance in Kenya. Some of the instruments available nationally for us is the ASTGS, that is the agricultural sector, transforming growth strategy. We also have the National Food and Nutrition Security Policy. We also have national, regional dialogues for food systems who are convened and National Food Fortification Strategy Plan, that is 2018 and 2022. We also have some policies within the Kisumu County that will be addressed by my next speakers, and we also have the national training, sorry, my eyes, I forgot my classes. The national training and, let me just hold it a bit. The light is too much for me. The national, the national training, package and nutritional sensitive agriculture. Other policy or national training on nutritional sensitive agriculture on food strategy and programming. We also have the Ministry of Public Services, and under the Ministry of Services and Gender, we have the Women Economic Empowerment Strategy, that is 2020 and 2025. We have the National Food Safety Policy 2013. We have the Kenya Nutrition Action Plan, that is KENA, 2018-2022. And we have the Nairobi Metropolitan Services on Nutrition Action Plan 2020 and 2024. In that, there is also the public policy implementation. We are not able to achieve all these things if we do not have the clear policy implementation plans. The implementation plan may take different shapes. We can work with one, the top-down approach. That is the forward mapping that proposes policy implementation to begin with a decision being made by the central government in top-down approach. Implementing considers the highest level policy designer goals and traces the policy design implementation through the lowest level of implementation. Number 2 is bottom-up approach, which has been very well said by our president. The bottom-up approach proposes that policy implementation cannot separate from policy formulation. This approach looks at the whole policy cycle and stakeholders' involvement. And the last one is the hybrid synthesis. Can I have some approaches looks into, the hybrid looks into integrated and strengthen the weaknesses of top-down, bottom approach of policy implementation. We cannot achieve our policies adequately if we do not engage the duty bearers. And by engaging the duty bearers, we need the executive to exclusively approve policy making, development partners and donors influence policy and begin international commitment, which is also Parliament, the national and the county government, greatest influence by adopting the policy, amending and providing and enacting the appropriate bills. The civil society organization also have a role to play, and their role to play, that is to advocate and gather public opinions on what should be in the policy. Citizens, through public participations, are able to influence the policy by highlighting key priorities of issues affecting them at a local level. So they are also very key in policy formulation. And then we have the executive, who have the greatest influence as they are in charge of implementation. The Parliament should also, the executive is to, their greatest influence, they are recipient and they report the recommendations, because we can do much as civil society organization, but we need the government or the executive to be able to make decisions and give recommendations, and also help us in implementing the policies that are in place. I want to stop there because my next presenter will handle some of the things that are still in my under policy. Thank you.
Asante sana Eunice Owino for taking us through the various policy frameworks that we have in the country to help us realize the right to food. We know that we have to move from policy to action, because if we stop at policy, kwa ground vitu zitakuwa different, and we have to ensure that everyone's right to food is realized, and this requires collective action. And as she has said, collective action by different people in different capacities, the policy makers, the duty bearers, but also the community, the participation of the community. So we have very many representatives here from the Lake region who are working, and the ambassadors who are working on the right to food, and also the people in the national coalition. So we are in different ways agitating for the right to food and working to ensure that it is realized. So this it takes us to the next speaker, Wakili Kariuki, who will tell us about the right to food violations, their types and forms, and tell us how can we redress this. Karibu KK.
Small technical error on the microphone. But thank you. It's a different experience to be part of the minority, but I hope the gentlemen in the room feel well represented. Thank you for the ones who clapped. My quick joinder is just to tie from what the previous speaker was speaking, highlight quickly the international obligations on the right to food and how they tie to our constitutional provision, and then dwell first onto the subject of my conversation, which is the violations of the right to food. Now, the Constitution of Kenya at the preamble reads that we, the people, give unto ourselves, right? And that's what the previous speaker was trying to speak on, to the perspective of public participation in policy and governance derived from the Constitution of Kenya 2010. So we are in a space where we give unto ourselves a constitution which either the duty bearer and the one with the responsibility to enjoy the constitution have not fully appreciated the provisions. And that's why we find ourselves in a quagmire of what we call successive realization of social economic rights. So at Article 2, as read together with the preamble, we have given to ourselves a constitution that adopts international law as forming part and parcel of local law. So the Constitution says that all ratified international instruments form part of local law. And Kenya is a member of the International Convention on Social and Economic Rights. They have ratified the same and domesticated it at Article 43, which Article 43 then extends to provide the safeguard of social economic rights in general. More specifically, Article 43(1) at subsection C talks about the securing of the freedom from hunger. So every Kenyan has, the government of Kenya has an obligation to secure the freedom from hunger of its citizen, and by extension, ensuring there is access to adequate food of acceptable quality and acceptable quantity. As you can see myself, I am a partaker of acceptable quantity. So as we proceed to have this conversation, we must be in full realization of that particular perspective, that the government owes us an obligation first to protect us from being hungry. And the first speaker spoke about something like a cultural diversification of food. What is culturally acceptable? So the aspect of food sovereignty then comes in. And by extension, the government has an obligation to protect the sovereignty of food. Because how my friend Mswahili will be producing millet is not the same way my mom in my village produces millet. The sovereignty in the cultural aspect comes into the model of the means of production, the model, the style, the type of input that they would want to put in. And then there's an obligation to quickly not interfere with the cultural sovereignty of that particular model. So getting into violation. So what is a violation of your right to food? The first speaker spoke about obligations under the general comments, which is principally the government has three obligations. They have an obligation to respect your right to food. They have an obligation to, apologies. They have an obligation to respect, they have an obligation to protect, and they have an obligation to fulfill. So when we say an obligation to respect, it means that the government is under a mandatory legal obligation not to act in a manner likely to interfere with your peaceful enjoyment of the right to food. So the government cannot act in a manner that would interfere or intervene with the right to food. And these principles were, I don't know if you can remember the minimum core content conversation. So when you talk about social economic rights, we're talking about what are the bare minimum policy, legislative, and institutional standards that a government must, at the very least, adhere to ensure that there is no breaking of the right to food in this particular instance. So when we talk about the obligation to fulfill, we say that the government is then bound by that particular obligation to ensure that they do all institutional, policy, legislative, and even input adjustments to ensure that that particular right to food is then realized. And then when we've spoken to respect and fulfill, and the final one was to protect. So finally, the state is under an obligation to ensure that then any other factors external to you do not interfere with the right to food. So why do we do conversations on violation, and how can we prevent violation? My instruction was to also talk about litigation on the right to food. Now, in recent times, when we talk about aspects of respecting, fulfilling, and protecting, we have to bring to the cognizance what the Article 43(1)(c) then speaks to, which is acceptable quality, acceptable quantity, and safe food in that particular context. So there's been numerous litigation on the violation to the right to food, and some of which is international and some of which is local. Kenyan litigation landscape has really centered itself on the aspect of food safety, food accessibility. We have had recent time litigation on aspects of genetically modified food to the extent of how does it then ensure and affect food sustainability in production, how does it affect the long-term safety of the consumers, and how does it impact accessibility from a cost perspective. As the first speaker rightly put it, we are not supposed to put families and communities in a conversation of, if we eat today, will we go to hospital tomorrow? If we eat today, will we be able to access other rights? So do we choose to eat or do we choose to go to school? So the aspect of accessibility has to be met in all government framework and policies. And I remember during the keynote address by one of the speakers, she spoke about the Njaa revolution and the aspect of impact of food, the cost of living on the access to food. And that is another obligation the government has, where we talk about ensuring that price and tax measures do not necessarily then affect negatively the right to access food for many communities. So we have seen in different jurisdictions that there has been a successful protection of the right to food through litigation. In India, we have what we call a case that is PUCL standing for the People's Union on Civil Liberties against the government of India, which propelled a very effective international principle in protection of the right to food, that the right to food cannot be read in isolation because it is an anchor right to other fundamental human rights, like the right to life, extending to the right to education, the right to health, and other rights. Accordingly, the governments were set to have an obligation to ensure that the right to food is given the same level of prominence like the other fundamental human rights. So what are the key violations that we can say and speak to in our local context? As counties also understand that we have an obligation to secure the right to food under the fourth schedule, which now creates the constitutional obligations and separation of functions between the national and the county government. So we have to have an approach which is called the minimum core content strategy. The minimum core content strategy talks to specifically ensuring that at the very least, we do not exclude specific clusters of communities from achieving and realizing their right to food. So how is this done? Counties have an obligation to ensure that their means of production are supported. And when we talk about supporting means of production, there was a very interesting conversation in the morning about how do we secure land as a means of production? How do we ensure that communities that actually engage in production are then supported from a county context through policy and legislative and also institutional framework to get to support their production capacities. So when we talk about levies and costings in terms of cess and those other things, how can the county support the price and tax measures at a local level to ensure that they do not become an impediment to production and access to food? And when you extend that to social protection, because we have special interest groups, we also have key populations within the jurisdictions of these counties, persons living with disabilities, and also what we would like to call communities that are viewed as marginalized. How can the counties then, within their own frameworks and their policy and legislative and institutional approaches, secure the right to food for these communities? And also understanding that violations of the right to food are violations of omission, that the county and national governments need to understand that failure to act is actually punishable by law to that extent, that they have an obligation to ensure that these violations are avoided. And also extending to the previous conversation on violations of food sovereignty. How do we ensure that even as we do these subsidy programs, even as we do these technical and input programs, we do not necessarily deviate very far off from what is seemingly a violation of the food sovereignty perspective and the locally accepted qualities of food. I'd like to stop at that particular.
Asante sana wakili, you have highlighted, you've taken us from the international law to the national law to the county law, so we can see how how the right to food, the right to food is captured in our laws, but also how the state obligations, both on commission and omission. I think a lot of times, some things go through the cracks. Because we do not take note of when there's an omission. We don't want this to be a one-way kind of conversation. If it's a conversation, otherwise it to be a soliloquy. We want to have a conversation. So we'll take a few minutes to just get reactions from the audience members on the issues that have been discussed, whether it's on the definition of the right to food and the issues of food systems, or the international instruments, or the violations. I don't know if anyone has something they'd like to.
Just put up your hand. I'll be right wherever you are. Input on the conversation that we've had with the panelists here in.
Yeah, mmeamua ni sina maoni.
There should be somebody capturing those questions for us, kindly.
I want to thank the panelists very much for the knowledge that we have received, and very, very clear. My worry, my concern is how quickly will these things, whatever we've said, the laws and everything that we are doing here, begin to make a difference in the life of Achieng. I'm choosing to use Achieng instead of Wanjiku because we are in Kisumu. Because Achieng down there may be told that they have a right. And a little girl, a little child in the village, when the father decides not to provide the food and chooses to drink his pombe, which is his food, how does she report to the government or to the president? And as we continue to do legislation, will Achieng be alive when the changes begin to take place? Thank you.
We may not respond immediately. Any other question? Very good. Come here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all the panelists. I have a question for the lawyer, please. You've taught us about you've told us something about the violations on food. And you've told us about the county government and their mandate or their responsibility towards us as citizens. My question is, as citizens, because we all know that the problem that we have in Kenya today is issues to do with food. And we know that there's some counties that are actually going hungry. They cannot even afford a meal in a day. What can we as citizens do to ensure that the county governments where we live are able to provide what we need, especially in terms to right to food? Thank you.
Next, that lady here.
Thank you so much. My name is Maureen Kemunto from a civil society known as Transform Empowerment for Action Initiative. I will start by asking our CEC Agriculture, Kisumu County. I don't know whether he's still in the house. Because I come from Kisumu County, and it's the first time I'm hearing about the food and nutrition policy. Just like any other county, there are so many policies, but does the Mwananchi know about these policies? Because if you're not aware, then they might not be implemented. Number two, there's a speaker who's talked about the right to food and the policies that we have that talks about the right to food. But then, is it a reality on the ground? It's just a dream for us? So we need to ask ourselves. Then lastly, the role of CSOs. In as much as the county government boasts of having a citizen participation department, whenever we attend the citizen participation forums, people talk about education, people talk about health, no one talks about agriculture, which to me is the main backbone. I remember even as we were growing up, we were told that agriculture is the backbone of the Kenya's economy. But then go to Apuote today, it is flooded. And that has been the food basket for Kisumu County. And the county government is just quiet. So that means between now, the next 3 months, we will rely on food from Vihiga or Kisii counties. So that's food for thought for the county government and the civil society represented here. Thank you.
There was somebody there.
Thank you very much. My name is Zulfikar. I have a few questions. Number one is for Njeri, Madam Njeri. She put it well that we have two folds of access to food, and that is economic and physical. And going by physical, she also mentioned that we have challenges in terms of access and control because in food production, we are looking at land as a capital that we must always use in ensuring that we produce adequately. You will also agree with me that when you are talking about food production, by and large, our women becomes handy in use of land as a food production media. But how again are they able to access and have control over the same? Because if you look at it practically on the ground, most of our widows, nowadays, we have cases of disinheritance either by their in-laws or those who are close to them. How again are we making sure that they are able to adequately use and access those particular mode of food production? The other thing is about the structures that we have. Looking at the county, the national structures, we know that we have structures in the communities, i.e. we have structures like the RUAs. The RUAs, the Water Resources Users Associations, who are also mandated with the protection of environmental issues, which are also enablers in terms of food production. How are they been given that political goodwill right from the national level to the local level where they are supposed to be implementing whatever they are supposed to be implementing? How are they given that political goodwill to ensure that they are able to facilitate those who are interested in food production? And lastly, we know that Kenya, we have water bodies. Currently, we've experienced a lot of rains. The waters are just running into our lakes and the other rivers. But when you want to, for instance, use the lake water for irrigation, you are told the Cairo Treaty is still in effect. To our Ebu Wakili, how have you, as probably a member of law society or even just an individual, come up with a bid to ensure that we help our farmers to at least see to it that that particular treaty is probably amended or revised so that we are also able to properly use our lake water for irrigation? Thank you very much.
The last question, so that we give them time to respond. The last question.
Okay, mine is to all of us in the room. The executive director of TISA, I think, raised the issue of devolution. Mine is on the impunity from national government on the devolved functions. One is the access to farm inputs. Why is the national government handling this? Two, the national government is mismanaging our health systems. What are we going to do as action points in this room moving forward? Because these are issues bombarding us every day in from our television screens.
Back to you, Madam Sipala.
Asante sana, Bwana Director. So we will go around with the panel, and we may not be able to answer all the questions, but I'll ask the panelists to pick an aspect that they can speak to briefly, so that we can make way for the next panel. So I'll start with you, Njeri.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all these questions. I will first answer Consolata's and Maureen's question. What does right to food look like on the ground? So right to food is a human rights approach, or right to food involves empowering people to know and understand their rights and entitlements. I will give an example. We have maybe persons with disability groups who are benefiting from Inua Jamii or the cash transfer program. Sometimes you find, either they are deregistered or the cash transfer stops coming to them, but they know that this is a right, this is an entitlement for them, that this cash transfer, 2,000 ya every month, inamsaidia kwenda sokoni kununua chakula. You see, cash transfer goes to elderly, PWDs and OVCs. So this is a basic entitlement for them to access healthy food. So when they understand that this is an entitlement and how it relates to them accessing food, they organize, mobilize, and demand for these rights. Yeah, they expose corruption in this program. Yeah, so these are some of the ways that right to food looks like. Again, public participation. When we are talking about rights and responsibilities, as citizens, we need to be active citizens. We need to participate. Sometimes we go to the field, people have a lot of grievances, but then you ask, uli report? Did you report this somewhere? And they said, hata nikireport nitasaidiwa aje. But you see, you have to report because the WAO, the SCAO, the RUA does not know your violation or the grievance you have upon a service. So citizens have to participate, have to be involved. I'll give an example of the Lake Region Network, and Swahili will talk about it later. Civil society, I think Maureen asked this question, what is the role of civil society? As civil society, we need to facilitate inclusive participation. County governments, yes, they usually have the list of people they invite to public participation, but we should lobby them to expand the space and also take the message to the people that usiende kuchukua ile stipend. Kwa sababu wakitengeneza decision ati a road is to be built here and you're not there to say that watoto wetu ndio wa benefit kujenga hiyo barabara, they bring other people to do infrastructure, you see you have lost out. Your voice was not there in the room. So go because it is your responsibility as a Kenyan citizen. Again, for civil society, organize, prepare your memos, priorities, and attend public participation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Njeri. You've had organize, don't agonize, we need to organize. Eunice, Madam Eunice, over to you now.
Thank you very much.
Kindly, Sipala, take note of time, just for purposes of us moving
Thank you very much. I would respond to the person who asked about how quickly can we make these policies understood and also make a difference and have impact at the grassroots level. I would say it's a collective responsibility, and our role, I appreciate my colleague who's talked about public participation. That is where our voices relies, and that is where our voices are. If we don't participate at the public, if we don't participate at that level, we are going to miss out, because at the budgeting level, our priorities that we want will miss out. So probably first thing that we need to start with as stakeholders, ask yourself, how well have you been participating at the public participation forums, whereby we make decisions. We don't let people make decisions for ourselves. I talked about the government being, the executive being the duty bearer and have the greatest influence in making change to this country. But they are not going to do that if we do not have social mobilization by ourselves and have a deliberate effort to be able to address our own issues. Another thing, the parliament. We have the parliament, which can also help us by oversight role and execution. But it is a collective responsibility. Issues of nutrition, initially it was a matter of health department, but if we need to mainstream nutrition in all sectors so that the water department talks about nutrition, the trade, so it is in all sectors. It is not just a prerogative of the health department. But I think we are making strides and we are seeing changes, because now we are having stakeholder forums, bringing all these people together to be able to help us address. And this, we should also have dissemination forums. We cannot have policies. I believe all of us have these policies in our shelves. But how many people take initiative to go to the ground to disseminate this information to our people so that we talk about rights? What is right to food if I'm sleeping hungry in the house? So ask yourself that question and we'll meet again.
Asante sana, Eunice. So we now go to Karaoke. You can maybe sum up on the legal issues
All right.
briefly.
So, thank you. In cognizance of the fact that you're out of time, I've taken 3 questions. I'll try to address them as fast as possible. The first one is, which was a very good question, how do we ensure that there is a trickle-down effect to the intended target audience? Number one, let us build information base in terms of understanding of the rights by the communities. That is very prudent. Let them know what is owed to them, and then bring them up to a point that these kinds of conversations are user-led. It is one thing for Kariuki in a suit and tie to sit here and talk about the right to food, but all of us can remember a phrase like Waligula. Do you remember that phrase? That was a user-led advocacy against corruption to the county government. And all of us understand that we've never forgotten that one mzee who spoke against it, and as a user-led perspective, there was more impact. So let's bring the communities up to understand their rights and obligations, and then let's empower them to speak out for themselves in terms of breach, to complain in violations, and to also push the governments to deliver. Secondly, there was a question on flooding, and I think we cannot ignore the impacts of climate change in this particular aspect of right to food to the extent that this is a multi-sectoral issue. So when you're talking about planning around your advocacy, also plan around climate resilience conversations, plan around the impact of climate change in agriculture and output accordingly, and also let's empower the county government to have more information to understand their obligation around climate change and climate resilience as an impact to the right to food, to agriculture and the right to food by extension. And finally, what are we doing to ensure that these treaties then become law? I think it is important at this particular juncture to say that there's a lot of conversation on policy and legislation at national and county level. So the National Coalition on the Right to Food is trying to do is to push for national legislation on the right to food, which will harmonize all these issues and create a national standard on what needs to be seen in government enforcement of the treaties supporting the right to food. And also these kinds of conversation and these kinds of dialogues are important at county level because we bring to the fore what the county needs to do. The county also tells us what they're planning to do. And then we also have further conversation on what else can we do from a collaborative perspective to enhance the realization and protection of the right to food.
Asante sana. And with this, we'll bring our conversation to a close. Thank you very much to our panelists, Kariuki Kariba, Eunice Owino, Njeri Karanu, and also to all of you for your participation, listening, and also giving your feedback and asking questions. Erokamano.
Asante sana. Asante sana to the moderator and the panelists. While they are taking their seats, ladies and gentlemen, shall we give them 3 hearty claps? 1, 2, 3. Asanteni sana. I want to give direction as follows. 1, our keynote speaker and the gentleman who will also declare this dialogue open is already with us here. And he will join us in the session after tea. So we are going to break for tea. But before we break for tea, I would request Mr. Jackson Mwita to be upstanding. Kindly come. He'll do for us a word of prayer for tea. And then 2, for purposes of guidance, immediately the keynote speaker comes in, we shall have a round of introduction. Remember, we didn't do that because we said it would be duplication. Based on the organizations that are gathered here. Then we shall have entertainment. Entertainment by a team called Amazon Theater Ensemble. They're in the house. Immediately after the entertainment, we shall then get into brief remarks from the partners so that the chief guest is well appraised on what is happening here. And finally, we shall get into speeches that will eventually culminate into an address by His Excellency, the Governor, who is the keynote speaker and the chief guest. Kindly be appraised as I have indicated. Please do for us a word of prayer, and we are hoping we are praying for tea.
Can we stand up, pray for the tea? Yeah. O Almighty Jesus Christ, we pray for the cup of tea so that we can bless it. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray and believe. Amen.
Asanteni, we only have 20 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, so tea is served right outside here, immediately after the back entrance. immediately after the back entrance. I also did not notify the delegates that the washrooms are on my left. Please take note. Thank you once again. Your Excellency, as the stakeholders keep streaming in, it's also important to alert you on the composition of the stakeholders we have right here in the auditorium. We have representatives from the county government of Vihiga. We also have representatives from Kisumu County, led by the CEC for Agriculture, who is in our presence here. We have national government representatives working in sectors on food and agriculture, governance and social protection. We have colleagues from national government stationed in Vihiga County who are in charge of social services. They are also here with us. We have the civil society organizations here, very many of them. We have WHH led by Christian, who is here with us. We have TISA led by Madam Diana. We have another civil society called Scaling Up Nutrition. It's a civil society organization. We have the Institute for Social Accountability, which is led by Diana right here. We have Right to Food Coalition, Lake Region Food Systems Network, Social Justice Centers, Right to Food Ambassadors, and other members from the universities. And therefore, Your Excellency, at this moment, with a lot of humility, allow me to do a round of introduction for a very few minutes before we get into the program. So right here, if you know you are a representative as a staff or employee in Vihiga County, kindly please just raise your hand, except for CECs. Kindly raise up your hand wherever you are. There's Mr. Ongonda here. I've seen that. Yes, there's that lady there with us. From Kisumu, is there any staff from Kisumu apart from the CEC? May I see those who come from the Lake Region Food Systems, wherever you are? Yes, they are here in big numbers, Your Excellency. Lake Region Food Systems. Those who come from Scaling Up Nutrition, wherever you are, Scaling Up Nutrition. Thank you. Very well. ROA, Rural Outreach Africa. There is Rural Outreach Africa here. There is Njeri, but I think she's more engaged in a discussion there. We have TISA, the Institute for Social Accountability. Very good, a gentleman there. We also have Diana here. There is Sheila with TISA, our program officer. We also have representative from APHRC. APHRC. We have representatives from Food Systems Network, Social Justice Centers, Food Systems Network, Social Justice Centers. And then we also have Right to Food Ambassadors. Right to Food Ambassadors in big numbers from Vihiga County, particularly, Your Excellency. They are here with us. Having said that, Your Excellency, may I therefore, with humility, invite a group referred to as Amazon Theatrics Ensemble for a brief session of entertainment. Where are they? Amazon Theatrics Ensemble. Oh, they're already here. I was worried they have not come. Karibu.
Wanasema kuishi kwingi ndio kuona mengi. Nilikuja nikajipata. Wanasema fahali wawili wakipigana nyazi ndo umia. Vita vya panzi, furaha ya kunguni. Baba Alishi alitoka hapa jana. Hadi saa hizi sijamwona ng'o. Anataka niishi aje na watoto. This is too much. I can't live in this kind of life. Nini? Mami nasikia njaa. Tangu juzi nimekuwa nikikunywa tu maji tu. Nasikia njaa mami. Unasikia njaa? baba yako aliacha maji, na hiyo maji ndio utakunywa. Ukipenda kunywa hata supadra mzima.
Mimi nataka chakula, nasikia njaa.
Unataka chakula? Then eat me. Nichukue unipike. Uniweke kwa sufuria, unikande vizuri. Uweke nyanya, uweke firifiri, hadi uweke pilipili hoho. Ukipenda nikule wet fry ama boil.
Mami, kama ni hivyo, nitaenda kukula kwa Juli. Juli leo asubuhi, leo nimeona la mkate ya maziwa. Mkate nimepaka blue band. Jugu, alafu kaongezea kirabuni hapo hivyo. Lunch jana. Lunch jana alikula ugali nyama, mboga, wakaongezea juice kidogo tu. Sapa. Wakakula kuku, ugali na mboga. Alafu unajua nini? Juli juzi akaletea githeri tamu yenye mkaranga na waru. Mimi nikakula.
Alikuletea nini? Yaani wewe mtoto kazi yako tu ni kukula kwa jirani. Baba yako ananisumbua huku, wewe unanisumbua huku. Nitatoka niache kwa hii nyumba.
Mami basi mimi nitama kwa hii nyumba. Yeye nishi kuna Juli huku.
Toka hapa. Nimesema toka hapa. Na ukienda huko kwa kina Juli, kitu ujue ni mimi ndo nilikuzaa. Enyewe Jaden ako na point. Chakula inafaa kukua kwa hii nyumba. Lakini sasa tatoa chakula wapi? Mimi mwenyewe kazi liniishia. Hebu acha niongoje leo nione kama atakuja na kitu. Mbona sioni huru bag? Kelele niko nayo ni moja tu na ni ya chakula peke yake.
Mama Jaide, hii ni message gani unaniandikia?
Message nimekutumia ni timetable ya chakula.
Timetable ya chakula? Hao ndio wazungu ni baki Kenya. Ati mnanitumia timetable ya chakula? Mama Jaide, hata wewe unajua tu vizuri. Bali nilikuwa nafanya kazi. Kazi iliisha. Sasa nitatoa wapi pesa ya kutumia hii timetable ona?
Pesa utatoa wapi na? Pesa ya chakula hauna. Lakini ya kwenda kwa mamotieno kukunini? Kukunywa pombe hiyo na hauna?
Wewe, acha na maisha.
Hiyo hauna.
Wewe wakati unakunyonga chai, ushaona nini kuuliza? Unaingilia maisha yangu.
Lazima niingilie kama chakula ipatikani kwa hii nyumba.
Unaona wewe Mama Jaide. Sasa hii uchumi haiko, unaona? Sasa hii uchumi yenyewe si pocket friendly. Unaona? Sasa hata nyinyi unaona uchumi si pocket friendly.
Sasa unataka kuniambia uchumi nasema nikikula leo breakfast, lunch sikuli, sapa sikuli, na kwetu ulinitoa kama nimenona hata nimekonda.
Mama Jaide, kusema kweli sikupenda kwako, no. Hata nimejaribu, natembea kila sehemu, najaribu kama
Wewe zidi kujaribu. Kitu nataka ujue saa hii ni mtoto wako Jaide ako kwa jirani anakula huko.
Acha tu akule. Sasa hivi watu wanasaidiana. Hata wao kulanga hapo.
Hata wao kulanga, acha nikuambie. Si story na chakula tu peke yake. Kwani huku sikia ile story? Story ya nini mtoto wa Uchie?
Mtoto wa Uchie?
Selenda kukula kwa nini? Kwa ule mkisi. Akabakwa huko. Alibakwa juu tu ya chakula tu. Hata huyo Jaden wetu juu kata kama yeye si msichana, yeye ni kijana. Lakini anaweza kuwa soda umaizuka alafu anapewa chakula. In fact hata maybe saa hizi siku hizi anapenda kwenda huko juu. Anakuwa soda umaizitajui na anapewa chakula. Wewe naye furahia tu.
Sasa tunafurahia Mama Jaide.
Wewe furahia.
Sasa tunafurahia Mama Jaide. Nani imenifanya nikuwa?
Walai nisikudanganya mtoto wangu akipigwa juu ya uwizi, akiingia kwa uwizi, akapigwa. Nini? Nimepata Jaden huko kwa barabara akilia. Atamfukuza kwa kina Juli, akapigwa juu ya jamaiba pesa. Kwani what's the matter? Mpe Jaden chakula. Tutoe yote. Mama Jaden na baba Jaden. The Kenyan Constitution, Article 41 inasema everybody has a right to food. Mtu kama Jaden anafaa kukula, pia kuwe na akili nzuri yenye iko active enough kukua class. Hata nyinyi wenyewe mnafaa kukula ndio mpate uwezo wa kufanya kazi kujenge nchi.
Si prosa.
Mama Jaide.
Si prosa ni amesoma.
Mimi nilisoma
na kwanga mrefu.
Niwadanganya nilizani shule ni.
Unataka kitu imenishangaza. Yaani chakula yenyewe mimi nakulanga hapo kwa muda siku moja naruka siku nyingine. Iko hadi kwa constitution ya Kenya.
Tuko na right ya kukula nini balance diet. Wewe umetuweka tu tunakula leo kesha tukuli tuna.
Sasa kitu fulani. Si prosa. Na si prosa. Asante sana kwa kusaidia. Sasa kitu fulani. Jaide. Wewe na mama Jaide. Kuanzia leo nitaanza kutumia timetable kuitumia. So nitajaribu sana niweza mimi kama mwanaume
ya usiku Sam. Na kama machungwa hivi.
Si lazima aende anunue. Sasa hii kuna kitu inaitwa kitchen garden. Unaweza chukua upande mboga yako, kanyanya yako, yenye unatoanga kila siku for food security.
Si prosa. Yaani unamaanisha sasa hii tunaweza lima hapa kando tunaita chicken garden tunapanda mboga.
Baba Jason, si kitchen garden, ni kitchen garden.
Kitchen garden. Tunapanda mboga na tunachuna tu mboga yetu hapa tunapika pale. Si hata tununui, si ndio?
Na kwa hivyo unaona pale Grand Royal Suites watu wa Rural Outreach Africa na the Institute for Social Accountability pamoja na WHS wameleta mafunzo. Hebu twendeni tujifunze.
Si prosa. Wewe ndo unajua huko. Tangulia utuonyeshe njia.
Twendeni tujifunze tunafaa kujui.
Asanteni sana, makofi kwao. Asante sana. Quite informative and thematic. Your Excellency, I want to take this opportunity to invite the partners who have welcomed us here, beginning a representative for Rural Outreach Africa. Karibu sana, Bwana Gendi, for very few minutes just to appraise His Excellency the Governor on what is taking place here.
Asante sana. Your Excellency, sir, protocol observed. I stood here this morning and conveyed the message from our founder and CEO, Professor Ruth Onyango. Let me take this chance to admit her apologies. She would have really wished to be here. I know he's your friend, Your Excellency. And in the message I conveyed in the morning, I'm not going to read through. Professor Ruth Onyango has emphasized on the commitment to ensuring access to ample and nutritious food in Vihiga County, and also highlighted that despite the progress, challenges still persist, and mostly affecting children and pregnant women and mothers, and therefore the focus should be on tangible action, engagement, and accountability to empower the marginalized communities. The collaboration that we have received as Rural Outreach Africa in the county is commendable, and all your officers, Your Excellency, has accorded us a lot of support throughout our work, and Prof says, asante sana, Governor. This dialogue, therefore, serves as a catalyst for advocacy and collaboration towards enacting right to food legislation, aiming for a fairer and more inclusive society where adequate food is recognized as a universal right. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Asante sana. In the same vein, Your Excellency, may I take this opportunity with humility to invite Diana Gichengo, the National Coordinator for the Institute for Social Accountability, to make her remarks.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Dr. Otichilo, the Governor of Vihiga, and the County Executive Member for Kisumu, other County Executive Members, government officials, Christian, Vincent, members of civil society, Wakenya wenzangu, good afternoon. Your Excellency, allow me to highlight what I had stated earlier and just speak to the history of TISA working with the county of Vihiga under your leadership. We started working with you in your first term, and as an institution that seeks to have empowered citizens, we found a home in Vihiga where we have accountable government. It is not always that we as civil society actors working on social accountability, human rights are welcomed by government. But in Vihiga, you welcomed us, and I think during your campaign period, you allowed us to work with the citizens of Vihiga to give you scorecards, manifestos, and immediately you took office, you formalized that in the form of an MOU. Makofi kwa governor. Subsequently, we've worked very closely with your government and your officials around public participation and the grievance redress mechanism, together with ROA and with the support of WHH. And I think we have just finalized the toolkit that will be used to establish and formalize the terms of reference at the sub-county level and the ward level. We have heard of the processes that you have initiated around a toll-free number, a call center, and even an app. And you're aware that TISA has offered its Jihusishe app so that wananchi wa Vihiga wajihusishe katika uongozi pale Vihiga. In addition to that, we have worked closely with the Right to Food ambassadors, 10 of whom watakuwa hapa kama wakilishi, and I hope you can ask them. You're a doctor, you're a teacher, you're a scholar, waulize kile wamejifunza and how it will impact the county of Vihiga. Finally, we highlighted the need for adequate resourcing for us to get the right to food, and we raised the concerns of budget constraints. We are aware that your government and that of Vihiga and that of Kisumu have in their CIDPs the right to food. However, our own tracking of allocation and so on, there are no resources. I also highlighted the fact that agriculture, which is very linked to the right to health, to the right to food, health, these two functions are barely devolved. All the money is still at the national government, and until that happens, we will keep moving further and further away from the right to food as opposed to coming closer. And finally, like Mama Jaden amesema, Baba Jaden amesema, ni sawa, you can eat from jirani. We highlighted the fact that we are still concerned that most of the food comes from our neighbors, and we are looking forward to hearing what we can do so that we start producing for ourselves food. The very last one, on matters of land, 2 weeks ago we were in Vihiga for a legal aid clinic, and one of the issues that emerged was the issue of land and succession. What was particularly concerning was huge areas, particularly Hamisi na ile sub-county iko karibu na Luanda inaitwa Emuhaya, where very many people came who have land and succession problems, but it is very difficult to help them because the original number is in the name of their great-grandparents. So even if you are to initiate succession, it is not very clear where do you start, which death certificate, which barrier. And I think where you have those huge tracts of land, it would be important that the county government initiates a process together with the National Land Commission of just transferring these titles to the current owners. That way people are able to get to be food secure. And even within the county, you will be able to track. You need revenue. You will have the right owners to be able to pay any rates that can be paid. So we hope this is an area that you can initiate reforms and support the people of Vihiga. And finally, the innovations that we are seeing of land leasing. Because there is not enough land, especially for the youth, they can start by leasing and they start producing food. If the county can consider looking into land lease issues, this we heard from Shibuye community health workers that have been working in Kakamega on a similar model. Again, an area we would welcome policy initiatives. As TISA, and the work we do, we commit to speaking very loudly about the fact that the national government has refused to devolve functions like agriculture and is still holding on to the money. Fellow Kenyans, You want the money, you want, do you want devolution? Munataka ugatuzi? Ama governor afunge virago akuwe MP? Ugatuzi. Kama mnataka ugatuzi, lazima tupiganie rasilimali na pesa zitoke national government. The counties only have 9% of the total budget. 91% is still at the national level. We will not get the development we desire unless we fight for that, and we commit to that moving forward. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Diana, for those very intuitive issues you've raised here. Your Excellency, sir, may I then take this opportunity to welcome, on behalf of WHH, Christian Schneiper to make his remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also from my side, Your Excellency, thank you very much for honoring this function. And also the executive member from Kisumu, thanks so much for making the time, and it's a pleasure to have you around. In my speech, I was trying to emphasize on the fact that it's a very relevant discussion that we have today here. Hunger and poverty is still one of the most pressing issues of our time, and that's so unfortunate because we live in a world, and also Kenya can be a much more wealthier country and distribute the resources much better. I also gave that example that Welthungerhilfe is publishing the Global Hunger Index every year, and also this year we did that. And unfortunately, Kenya ranks only 91 out of 125 countries in the world when it comes to hunger levels, and this is an alarming level according to that index. I also said that the right to food is not only a fundamental human right, but also a moral imperative for every community member, the entire society, to find the collective action that is needed to eradicate hunger and poverty out of the communities here in Vihiga, but also, of course, in the rest of Kenya. I took colleagues a bit through the program, so we would like to use this regional dialogue today on the right to food to improve our understanding on the legislation and the legal frameworks that are out there. The first panel handled that already very nicely. We will move on with looking into case studies and sharing practical experience from out there. We will talk about accountability in one of the panels, which is so paramount. And you as a county, you have demonstrated a lot of leadership here already with the grievance redress mechanism that is underway. And we would like, again, to thank you for this excellent cooperation that we had together. And also with a resource question that came out in our discussion during tea, and now also in the speech here of Diana. Of course, you find in us also an ally to fight for more resources to make such initiatives funded and successful in the end. Yeah, I thank the partners, of course. Again, I think we can't mention them often enough. So we have Rural Outreach Africa, the Institute for Social Accountability, but also the Zero Hunger Initiative, and then the very important Lake Region Food Systems Network. You've seen so many representatives are here, and they're also here on the panel. And also the Right to Food Coalition that has even made it to national level and is fighting for the cause of right to food. So we are not alone, and we thank you very much that you join this initiative and this fight for the right to food. And we mentioned it already. It's the mandate, and it's an obligation for all of us, for the government, for the stakeholders, for the NGOs, for the communities. And as Welthungerhilfe, we are very much happy to and proud to be part of this momentum. Thanks so much.
A new round of applause for Christian. Your Excellency, with humility again, allow me to recognize the presence of the Deputy Speaker, Eric O'Day, who just stepped in. Wave to us, O'Day. Thank you. We have Madam Decima, CEC for Gender. Thank you, Madam. We have Madam Grace Kadenge, in charge of lands and physical planning. Thank you. We have Honorable Kitungulu, the CEC for Agriculture in Vihiga County. Your Excellency, the first panel which dealt with the understanding right to food in Kenya had a very provocative discussion. I would, with your permission, request, just for 2 minutes, request the moderator who took us through that to come and give us a recap in just 2 minutes so that you are able to capture the issues that emerged out of it, which I know would go as an input into your conversation today. Karibu. Sorry?
Thank you, Bwana Director, Bwana Governor, the CCs, all protocol observed. Thank you so much for allowing us an opportunity to give a summary of what we discussed in the first panel, where we were looking at the right to food and the food systems, but we also discussed the role of CSOs in advancing the right to food, which include, and also food systems transformation. So which includes raising awareness amongst the public on the right to food, because sometimes we may know that we have the right to food, but we may not know how to unlock it. Also, the CSOs have been engaging in budget advocacy, as TISA has indicated, and also facilitating meaningful public participation, because we don't want to just have people participating, but it should be meaningful, so that the Wananchi engage in these discussions. We also talked about the community structures that exist in our communities. For example, the Water Resource Users Association, the RUA, and also the ward agric officers. And there was a question from one of the participants in this meeting, where the person asked, do they have political goodwill? So I think, we want to address that to you, Bwana Governor. Is there political goodwill to ensure that water, which is a really important resource when it comes to food production, that this can be accessed by the Water Resource Users Association, and also the linkage between the ward agriculture officers? To add to what Diana Gishango mentioned with regards to land, there was also a question from an audience member with regards to land as a factor of production. And the question was with regards to women's access to land, what can be done to ensure that women are not locked out of land as a factor of production, of food production, because sometimes women get locked out in matters of succession, or they're also, where they're disinherited, even though that right is guaranteed in the Constitution of Kenya 2010. So over 10 years on, surely, how can we ensure that we are able to unlock that right? And finally, and I think, again, the representative from TISA had talked about it, but let me just emphasize it because it came up in our conversation. What is the national government, why is the national government performing the roles, the functions in agriculture, for example, in agriculture, that are linked to the right to food, which they should be devolved? For example, the distribution of subsidized agriculture, subsidized fertilizer. So those are some of the highlights of what we discussed. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think our keynote speaker is now well appraised, the farthest we've come since morning, and I'm sure that will go into what will be his remarks when he will be taking onto the podium to address us. May I, Your Excellency, request the CEC for Agriculture, Honorable Kitunguru, to step forward to make a few remarks and recognize his colleagues. The program is moving quite fast. It's like Gari la Moshi, sindio?
Thank you, Your Excellency, our partners, the CCM in the House, and farmers. Good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Nicholas Kitungulu, and I'm the CCM for Agriculture, Livestock, and Fisheries. We are talking about right to food. But also another question we should also be asking ourselves, how safe is the food? How safe is the food? Because if you have the food, but it's not quality, it is not safe. It may also end up causing diseases. More so the cancer diseases, because of either poor handling of the food or the cereals. Because of the time, let me recognize and invite the CCM, first the CCM for Honorable Okoth, you will be representing the governor for Kisumu, so please, you will be invited later. Let me recognize the CCM from Vihiga, Honorable Kadenge. Please come and make a few remarks.
Thank you, Your Excellency, our Governor, Dr. Wilbur Otichilo, our Honorable Deputy Speaker, our partners, and everyone, good afternoon. Good afternoon once more. I am Grace Kadenge, the CCM for Physical Planning, Lands, Housing, and Urban Development. I'm glad to be here today. One of the realization is land is a key factor to food security. And I'm here to learn. And Your Excellency, as a department, we are working on a policy that is going to support securing of land and tenure to the vulnerable groups, the women and the poor. And we've had issues, especially in our counties at the local level, where we have what Diana talked about, Diana Gishingo, about women being disinherited, women being denied a right to land. And that is a threat to food security. So we are working on the policy that is going to guide, that is going to protect the vulnerable groups, the women and the poor from access to land, and that will go a long way in protecting food security in our county. Thank you so much, and be blessed.
Thank you, Honorable Kadenge. In this meeting, we had Waziri for Gender. I think I stepped out. Let me also recognize our Deputy Speaker of the county government, or the county government of Vihiga Assembly, Honorable Day, to come and make a few remarks. Thank you, Karibu.
Thank you, CC. Your Excellency, the Governor, the CC members present, both from Vihiga and Kisumu County, Chief Officers present, and our partners, that is Christian, Ruth, and another one called Diana Chengo, and all officials present and farmers. Good afternoon. I'm Eric Odei Obam, the MCA Gisambai, and also the Deputy Speaker, Vihiga County Assembly. I'm privileged to be here today, courtesy of the TISA. TISA invited me. We have been working with them. We had a sensitization program at Sosa Cottages as the assembly with TISA. And it happened that, Your Excellency, one of the TISA facilitator who took members through at Sosa was my colleague at Moi University. So he was a comrade, and he was also a MUSO director. So he was asking me why I got into politics, and he was in politics in campus. So I told him, now I came in Mashinani, I'm well conversed with the politics in Mashinani than in campus. That is Eric Kinaga, who was my good friend at the campus. So I want to agree, they have talked about legislation. We discussed with them at SOSA at large, how we can partner with them in terms of legislation. And even today, Your Excellency, as you see me here, after this, we are going to have a small engagement. We see how we can partner in terms of the legislation that we need them also to assist us at the county assembly, and see how we can even co-fund on various legislation that we would want them also to support us. They have also directed us on a policy where we can come in so that we can improve on food security. Your Excellency, we have a problem in terms of improving our food security. One, you understand that in terms of population, we are densely populated and the land size is small. So if we need to harvest more, we usually do what we call renting the land, either in schemes or Nandi there, so that we can harvest more and bring to Vihiga. But the small land that we are having, we at least make use of them so that we can at least harvest something. And Your Excellency, I want to thank you in particular, because you've been spearheading this program called fertilizer, subsidized fertilizer within various sub-counties. You ensured that even those sub-counties that has no national cereal boards, halls where they can store this fertilizer, you coordinated with the area members of parliament to get a hall in those constituencies so that our people can access the subsidized fertilizers near their constituencies. Your Excellency, there is a problem, and it's good our partners are here, we say it. We usually have a problem, particularly when the government, you see the government has a good policy to enhance the productivity, but we usually have a problem when it comes now to people with the negative attitude towards the program. You find that they will always mislead or discourage farmers that don't go buy that fertilizer, it's a fake fertilizer, when it's just a good fertilizer. Check, last year, most of our farmers were discouraged not to go and buy fertilizer from the cereal board. But check the harvest that came out for those counties and for those farmers who went to the cereal board and bought those fertilizer. They harvested a lot. This year, you've seen, when the government brought in the subsidized fertilizer, we have so many farmers who are told don't go and buy because they...
But come over here in Vihiga, we have a lot of tracts of land that is lying fallow. So why? People own land, but they don't want to use it for productive purposes. There are policies, and I was part of those policies, land use policy, which says if you don't use your land, you should pay tax, because you are denying other people in food production. So if you have your fallow land, you are not using it, you should pay tax or lease it out. So that is an area that we need to address. Still under production. We can produce more food than we require and even export. With the new technologies that now are available, we can produce more food than we require and we can export. So why don't we sensitize people? I think now from today, I think as we go out, we already know, people know the importance of food. And I don't think there is any who doesn't. I think now what we need to focus on, and I'm very happy, Rural Outreach Africa has been doing the same. And I have a lot of respect for Professor Nyango, because she has done a credible job over years. Let's go out and now tell people, let's produce food. Let us produce food. We know the importance. Let's produce it now. And once we produce, we have to tell people, how do we use that food? How do we store it? Because we lose more of the foods we produce because of poor storage facilities. Therefore, we need to have a proper mechanism of producing food, doing value addition, and being able to preserve it. So if we focus on that, I I believe the issue of food insecurity will not arise. Under the production systems, there is a mindset among our people, and I also want to refer to Vihiga, where once we have a project, like some of the projects we have, whether funded by World Bank, World Food and FAO, and any other, when those projects come to our people, their mindset is that these are projects, that what the projects are coming for is to give us free money. And even after all we do about sensitization, food production, and so on and so on and so on, when they are given the money to do what they have been taught, instead of doing what they have been taught, they plan on how to share the money and pocket it. And we have many instances. Like the previous, I'm sure Kisumu, you had it, the NARIG 1 project. It was set out to sensitize people on how to produce food. And they had all sorts of value chains, production, dairy farming, banana production, leafy African vegetables, affogatos, all it, name it. And people went through very rigorous training program. We formed committees. We formed groups. I think in Vihiga we formed 830 groups. And after we trained them, the program even said now, normally government doesn't give money to the local people. Let the money go to the groups direct. They formed their own, groups and all their bank accounts. Then after they qualified, after training, we put money in their bank accounts. But what happened? Once we put in the bank accounts, quite a number of the leaders of those groups started planning on how to eat the money. And majority of them withdrew the money. They say they are going to buy what they say they were going to buy. But they didn't buy. Instead, some of that money was misappropriated. So now we are going to phase 2 of the project, which is now where we are supposed now to do value addition, because they are supposed to know how to produce under phase 1 of NARIG. But if you go across, and I have information across all the 45 counties, the production may not be what we expected. And if it's there, it's very minimal. So now we are getting to phase 2 of the project, what we are calling NAVI's CDP. Coming now to do value chain, now to go in value addition. But in the first phase, people didn't do what was supposed. So what do you expect in the second phase? What are they going to do? I'm telling you this to show you that it is not the lack of money. It's the lack of commitment and the attitude of our people. That anything that comes from government is free and does not matter whether you do the right thing or not, because after all, it's free. And for us who are politicians, they say these are political goods. My deputy speaker there will tell you, we formed the Trade and Enterprise Fund to give to business people. See, member is here who was there before. We put money, I put 50 million to access money to youth, to women, to do work, to do production. They were trained, and after that we gave them the loans. Grace, how many have paid back? So you can see. So what are we talking about? It's attitude. Money is available. For youth, fund is there. Women fund is there. And all these other funds are there. But when our people take the money, they don't do what they say they will do. So I want, as we move to the next level, let's see how. I'm aware WHH, you have been in Vihiga for the last 5 years. You had good intention, very good intention, to increase milk production. And you even told us that if we increase milk production to 5,000 liters per day, you will help us put a processing plant. I participated a lot in your programs, in giving animals, animal health, AIA programs, all those. But we have not reached even producing 2,000 liters per day. So what went wrong? Because everything was provided. So we need to go back on the drawing board and ask ourselves. Because unless we ask these tough questions, we are going to just go around in circles and do nothing. So I want to end my intervention or my discussion by saying that the opportunity is there. And I think from my long-term experience, I have learned that if you want to succeed, start with those people who are already doing something. Start with the people who are doing something. If you want to support milk production, support the guy, the farmer who has already an animal and is producing milk, probably 5 liters. Help that mama now to produce 20 liters per day. But if you give to a guy who is walking around and is used to talking, I want to give you an example. You know, I'm a very practical person. With the WHH, we said they will give us the technical know-how and so on. And I said, I'll be buying great cattle, hybrid animals to give to groups. And through Agriculture Department, the CEC is here. We decided we have the WHH train, give all the other issues, we will buy the animals for the groups. The groups were formed. We went and sought the best breeds of animals from Uasin Gishu, Trans Nzoia. Even we brought some all the way from Kidunguri, which has the best breeds. And we gave to the groups. After we trained them, what happened? I gave more than 500 great animals. I gave more than 100 great goats. The goats, I got them from Meru. What happens? The deputy speaker is here. We were the ones who approved the money for me. What happened? You can't trace those animals. Some of them were slaughtered in matangas, in funerals. Others were sold. Immediately I handed over the animals. Some of them already had market to sell the animals. So, what next am I supposed to do? So we need to go back. I still want our people, unless we change the attitude of our people. And with this advent of the belief that you can get everything free without doing anything. And people believe that now all you need is just to talk, to become a politician, and everything you'll get. It can't work. So let's address this issue. We cannot practice agriculture the way we practiced long time ago. With the climate change, we have to do things different. We can't do rain-fed agriculture. Here in Vihiga, there is no, out of 365 days in a year, for the last 6 years, we have had rain for more than 300 days. But people are still telling you they are hungry. They have no food. Even when it's raining and it's not the rain season, in their mind, they are saying the planting season is yet to come. Because it has been raining. It has never stopped here, in our place here. But people have been waiting the planting season in March, April. So why don't we change? The climate change has changed. Everything has changed. Why don't we do things different? It's raining so hard. And we are watching the water go to Lake Victoria. Why are we not conserving this water? So that when there's no rain, we shall do irrigation. We shall use the water for irrigation. So let us go to the drawing board. But food is necessary, it's essential. But we must produce it, we must conserve it. A number of issues were raised, which I just want to allude to before I end. There was the issue of land tenure system that is hampering us from food production, particularly for the women and the youth. Yes, it is true. Some of the lands that are owned by people actually who died. There's never been succession. So for us in Vihiga, we are having a program that we want to rehab these lands process where we can have the titling done based on public participation and involvement of those concerned. So that's something that we are working on. Access to water. Yes, we are working with the RUAs and all other organizations to have access to water. And it's our program that every community should access to water. And we are doing various programs. Conservation of our water catchment areas, Maragoli ecosystem being the key, because that's where most of our rivers come. We are also conserving other indigenous forests and indigenous water springs so that we have access to water. And finally, as the Department of Agriculture, we have said with rain, with climate change, we are going to go into irrigation. We have already established the first irrigation scheme in Vihiga. We put in 50 million to put an irrigation scheme. And we have recruited more than 250 farmers to use the scheme. But still there are those many farmers who still wait the rain to come. And they don't believe the water from the river can be used for agriculture. They still have, we have given all the reticulation, but we have so many of them who still wait until it rains is when they can plant. So we have a problem again to teach people how irrigation works and whether the water is from the river or from the rain, it is still water. Devolution of agricultural functions, I agree. This is an issue the Council of Governors we are addressing. Many of the functions under agriculture are still not devolved. In fact, 3/4 of the monies that are supposed to come to the counties are still retained at the headquarters. So most of our departments of agriculture actually depend on donor-funded projects. Most of the money is held at the headquarters, and that's why every week we receive letters of invitation to go for workshops and seminars. In Naivasha has become the place for everybody to go. So there is Naivasha, there is Machakos, then there is Mombasa. So most of our monies that are supposed to come to improve agricultural productivity is being used in seminars and workshops. That's a fact. That's a fact. So until we get that money from the headquarters where they are using money for seminars and workshops, we cannot increase productivity. We have the good laws. They have written good laws, but laws don't produce food. It's people who produce food. I think those were the key areas of concern. Otherwise, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity, and I want to assure you, particularly the civil society who are involved in this, you are doing a good work, and you must fight, help us fight for devolution to work. Because the way things are, if you people in the villages, you are not going to fight for devolution, devolution may not be there. Because the signs are that most of the activities that were supposed to be devolved, even those devolved, are being glowed back to the national government. So if things don't change in the very near future, county governments are going to become local governments the way they were before. Thank you.
Asante.
Asante sana, Your Excellency, for those remarks. What caught my attention, he was not reading anywhere all this while. That means he has a grip of what he was talking about, right? I want you, while still standing, to just warm your hands. We want to appreciate His Excellency for those educative and innovative comments that have gone into some of what came out of the panel here. Ebu warm. Aya. Tunampea tatu. Moja. Mbili. Tatu. Asante sana, Your Excellency. We cannot regret having invited you to come today because you've spoken into the real themes that have guided this conversation. And there is a panel discussion here, Your Excellency, which I know is very critical for your administration. And I really don't want to go into much, but just to invite the panel to step forward quite very fast so that we try to catch up with time. Before the panel comes, Your Excellency, I would wish to, in about a minute, introduce the moderator for the panel that we are walking into. The panel theme is accountability and enforcement, building awareness and advocacy. The panel moderator or chair is one Mr. Ongala Morris, a member of the Chartered Institute for Public Relations. Morris Ongala is a research and development communications practitioner, and he has spent a decade supporting organizations to communicate their work with strategy and impact. Morris is a research communications manager with the Policy Engagement and Communications Program at the African Population and Research Center. And in this role, he leads a team that supports numerous projects in 36 countries of the sub-Saharan Africa. Morris is a PhD candidate in strategic management at the Strathmore Business School. It is Morris who will guide for us the panel that we are going to discuss. Makofi kwa Morris. Karibu Morris. And Morris, I would wish you remain faithful to time management. Karibu.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. God is good, and all the time. Thank you. Without much ado, thank you so much, Mr. MC, for the introduction. Your Excellency, the Governor, and protocol observed, I would like to welcome the next panel. And because time is fast spent, I will go straight into it. And the first panelist, as I call your name, as I introduce you, just walk straight here and take your seat. Then we will take about 30 minutes to do this, and I hope we'll have a few more minutes to do some Q&A. Then we call the panel off. Number one is Sheila Maloba. Sheila Maloba, as she comes, is an agricultural economist, governance and policy expert, and program lead for the Right to Food program in Kenya. Makofi, Makofi, Makofi. Please. Round of applause. Thank you, Sheila. Next panelist for this panel is Evans Muswahili Ladema. Evans Muswahili Ladema is a community paralegal and a development practitioner specializing in human rights defense, climate justice, and food systems transformation. Currently, Evans serves as the chairperson for the Lake Region Food System Network and is an alumnus of UNFCCC's COP27 and COP28. Next is Gloria Mishira. Where's Gloria? Thank you. As she comes, Gloria has a background in communication and public relations, but currently, of course, she is also a certified Kenyan Sign Language interpreter, but currently she leads the team that works on rights to food at KEFRA. KEFRA is a Kenya Parliamentary what again? We will get it. We will get it. We have a lot of acronyms, so we better say them in full so that we understand what we are talking about. The next and last but not least is John Ogonda, who is Makofi as he comes. He is the Director, Public Participation and Civic Engagement in Vihiga County. And Vihiga is well represented here, which tells us something about the county. So John is a secretary to the County Grievance and Redress Committee, which is a very critical committee when it comes to the matters that we are discussing here today. He's also an academic researcher with great interest in policy and governance. I think we share that in common, John. Please clap for John again. I didn't hear that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to indulge you for the next few minutes. And the theme for this particular panel is aptly put, but I will just repeat it, accountability and enforcement in building awareness and advocacy. So when we talk matters right to food, there are several angles to it. The first angle definitely is the legal angle, which was well executed by the panel in the morning. And I know that KEFRA works a lot to, promote rights to food legislation at the grassroots level, especially working with the counties. And so far, KEFRA, as an organization, has supported about 19 counties in Kenya, I beg your pardon, to come up with the rights to food policies. Vihiga being one of them, am I correct? Okay. Yes. So we'd like to hear about more about what KEFRA does with regards to policy entrenchment, legislation regarding rights to food. But the next and critical aspect of rights to food is public engagement. We heard from KK advocates in the morning that the public really needs to know their right. If we do not know what our rights are, then we are as good as people who don't have rights. So it is actually needless to have very glowing policies, and we do not educate or sensitize the public about those particular policies. So once the policies are down and in paper, the next is to sensitize the public and tell them, you know what, this is supposed to be your right, and you're supposed to claim it. And in claiming it, this is the step that, in fact, there are even structures that they need to follow in claiming that right. So we're going to delve a little bit on that. So this panel will talk about accountability, enforcement, and building awareness and advocacy with regards to rights to food. And I will shoot straight to the first panelist, Ms. Sheila Maloba from TISA, that is the Institute of Social Accountability. Can you kindly elucidate to us, Sheila, what social accountability is and how it relates to the right to food? I know this is not a panel that does definitions. We have done the definitions in the morning. But quickly, kindly tie the two, social accountability and the right to food, especially in the context of the counties that we're working in Kenya.
Thank you so much. His Excellency, our partners, protocol observed. I'm here to speak about more accountability and its link to right to food. So social accountability refers to a broad range of actions beyond voting that citizens use to hold governments to account. And in the morning we heard about government obligations on the right to food. They are here to ensure that they are able to protect, fulfill, and respect the right to food. So this essentially means that in the aspect of protecting, that government are supposed to ensure we have safety foods, we have safety agricultural inputs, Maurice. We have safety seedlings that that are quite key in the production of food. In the issue also of fulfilling is to also vulnerable groups, the ones that are not able to provide themselves this food. How can the government come to place to ensure that vulnerable groups such as women, people with disabilities are able to access their right to food? So as social accountability, we are here first of all to build the awareness. Do people know you have the right to food? And we were told in the morning that Article 43(1)(c), the government is obligated to ensure that every Kenyan is free from hunger and have access to quality food. So with that foundation, Maurice, as a Kenyan, you are entitled to this right. And I'll reinstate what our able governor has said. We have laws. So the problem is now the implementation bit. And if the citizens are not aware of their rights, then for them to participate in the accountability bit, in the social accountability bit, becomes the challenge of the day.
Thank you very much. And you've talked aptly about how do you entrench accountability, especially regarding the rights to food for people living with disabilities.
Exactly.
Because they are greatly disadvantaged. They may not be as able as the others to claim these rights.
Yeah, so we have key government programs like the Inua Jamii program, which ideally is there to facilitate and ensure that vulnerable groups like the people with disabilities are able to access.
They also provide seeds. Another obligation of the state is to protect this right so that no one is discriminated when they